Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Egan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Egan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller hosting today, and we have a first-time guest, someone I've been wanting to get on for a long time, Professor Alejandro Baer of the University of Minnesota. And Professor Baer, who has some incredible credentials he'll tell you about, is the director of the Holocaust and Genocide Center at the university. And you're actually from Spain originally, right?
I am. Thank you for having me, Alan.
It's our pleasure.
I'm from Spain. I grew up in Spain, in Madrid, and but I was born in Argentina. My family is Argentinian. My parents are Argentinians. And, my grandparents are Germans. So that's the family story in a nutshell.
Your grandparents were German. Mm-hmm. You were born in Argentina. You grew up in Spain. You taught at a university in Germany?
That's correct.
And how did you
ended up in Minnesota.
How did you end up in Minnesota?
Well, you know, that's things in life. You know, one thing leads to another. I taught in Spain for 10 years at the Universidad Complutense, which is a big state university in Madrid. And then I got an offer to work in Germany with a colleague I had been working with at the University of Bayreuth, which is in Bavaria, not far from Munich. So I spent 2 years there, third year at the University of Munich. And then, well, actually, my plan was to stay in Germany for a longer time, but this opportunity came up. I found
and you came here for the weather.
And I came for, exactly. I had heard of the beautiful white winters here, and yeah, we liked it. So.
Now, the name of the Holocaust and Genocide Center here is in honor of Professor Stephen Feinstein. Mm-hmm. And Stephen, who actually was a guest on this show several times, also was responsible for me setting up a program on Holocaust and Genocide studies at one of our Minsky colleges. Mm-hmm. And he died unexpectedly and tragically about a half dozen years ago. So how long have you been at the U now?
This is my second year at the University of Minnesota. I say it's my second winter because that's what's relevant. But indeed, I came it was in the summer of 2012. So, and I'm honored to carry the name of Stephen Feinstein that's the name of the chair. I'm a Stephen Feinstein Chair in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. I'm very proud of that, and I have not ever met Stephen Feinstein, but I feel as if after these 2 years here, meeting several people that have worked with him, that knew him well, I have almost the impression that by now I know him, and I'm impressed by what a remarkable personality he was.
He accomplished so much during his time here, and it was a great loss. But from what I hear, you have picked up and you are running with the ball, so to speak.
Well, thank you. I am, definitely. I'm what do you say, in big footsteps, which is so the bar is high and the challenge is big, and but yeah, we're trying to do many things on different fronts at the Center for Holocaust Genocide Studies. We would say that the center has 3 principal missions, which is I would say that it's research, it's teaching, and it's outreach. So we're trying to develop those areas. in a way that also serves the community.
With the university, research and teaching is certainly a given, but outreach contains considered by what?
Yes, well, actually, I would also put together teaching and outreach, because part of the outreach is teaching beyond the university, which is we do at least 2 or 3 teacher workshops. We call them summer institutes. They're mostly in the summer, and these are K-12 teacher workshops on the Holocaust. Last year we did one on the Holocaust memory in Europe and the US. We were trying to look at different forms of Holocaust education and memorialization in different countries, how the local context influenced the way the Holocaust is taught. Then we did another one on November, commemorating the 75th anniversary of Kristallnacht, of the November pogrom. And there we focused on the issue of Sinti and Roma during the Holocaust. And now recently in April, we had the fortune of having Samuel Totten, who is a renowned Holocaust educator, but he taught a course on the Rwandan genocide. This spring we commemorated
1994, Rwanda.
Exactly. So it's the 20th anniversary.
Genocide there, which I incorporated as part of my class on genocide in 20th century. And one of the things that struck me when I was teaching, and the course I think is going to be renewed now at Inver Hills Community College, was how little knowledge our students actually had of the Holocaust. They've all heard of the Holocaust. They all got a couple of hours on the Holocaust in probably high school, but they really had no knowledge of how severe it was, how awful it was, and the consequences of it. And I think that's a failure of our educational system not to emphasize that, but not only history, but really the social sciences in that regard.
Definitely, I agree with that. There's a lot of work to do, and all efforts are good in that sense to improve the knowledge of the educators and the knowledge of the students, and so to pass on that knowledge, which is, and I see the problem that students have heard of the Holocaust. They've all heard of the Holocaust. I would even say the Holocaust is all around us, more even here, maybe even more, of course, than in Spain, where the challenge is also huge, but it's of a different nature. But the fact that they've heard of the Holocaust through popular culture, through the media, it is present, is not, they have often the impression that they already know about it, and that's not the case. They don't know the specifics, they don't know the implications, and of course it's necessary to put the records straight, to give them the relevant information, and to devote enough time to teach the Holocaust.
They don't understand that from 1939, when Poland was first attacked by Hitler, that the countries in Europe fell like dominoes. Some just gave up, some collaborated, and some tried to have some resistance. But the fact of the matter is, all of Europe, except for England, fell. A couple of countries were neutral, and they don't know the ramifications. They don't know that there were death camps and the number of death camps, plus hundreds of concentration camps. That they have heard that 6 million people died. Well, 6 million Jews died. But the fact of the matter is, those camps really incinerated about 11 million people. And they're dumbstruck when we go over that.
Well, you mentioned the very important difference between extermination camps and concentration camps, and also that is something that is not known, but that also blurs the specificity of the Jewish dimension of the Holocaust. And I try to emphasize that fact. Obviously, that doesn't mean that there were no other victims, but the uniqueness of the Holocaust, or the Shoah, as said in other countries like in France or in Israel, is the persecution, the genocide of the Jews. While there were other groups that were persecuted and that were assassinated, the specificity of the ideological component in the Nazi state to target the Jews for total extermination. That is
that was
an issue that
Hitler's final solution.
That needs to be emphasized.
And his final solution was to rid the world of the Jewish population. And he was well on his way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so this is, of course it needs to be taught, needs to be emphasized, and I think it's important that teachers also get that relevant information. Yeah, definitely.
Now, as I read articles at the present time, there seems to be a global rise of anti-Semitism. In other words, after the war, everybody was shocked. All these countries that stood by and did nothing, the countries that caved in to the Nazis, they certainly were, it's responsible really for the birth of Israel, but in 1948. But in fact, I think this week marks the anniversary of that birth. But there seems to be now a pattern of global anti-Semitism that is expanding. And how do you attribute that?
Well, you mentioned the creation of the State of Israel, and obviously Israel and the Israeli-Arab or Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a fundamental component of this new anti-Semitism. But one of the main features of new anti-Semitism is that those that the anti-Semites do not consider themselves anti-Semite, so they would reject that label at all, which was not something that happened ever before. Anti-Semitic would be proud of being. There was even an anti-Semitic league in 19th century Germany, and the Stürmer was anti-Semitic paper as defined by the editors and the writers. You don't have that now, and it's much more blurred. I would say that there's a problem of acknowledging the problem of anti-Semitism, and it's much more a problem in Europe, I would say, than it is here. And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict does not help. It doesn't help at all. But the fact that many who pass that line from criticism towards anti-Semitism, towards Jew bashing, towards using stereotypes and tropes of traditional anti-Semitism. I mean, this
even
is something
in this country. A member of the KKK, a former wizard of the KKK in Kansas City, just about a month ago, gunned down 3 people in front of a Jewish community center whom he thought were Jewish. And happens all 3 of them that he killed were not.
But it's still an anti-Semitic incident, of course.
Yeah, it was an anti-Semitic incident aimed at killing Jews. And that still permeates a lot of the mentality of these really neo-Nazi type thinkers.
Yes, I think when we talk about anti-Semitism, it's a broad array of phenomena, and it goes from a remark to obviously heinous attack, like the one in Kansas City. But also the nature, the ideological components are very different. And in that sense, of course, we have this. I would say this is a rather traditional right-wing extremist, racist anti-Semitism, which the case that you just described. But you have other phenomena that are not as clearly defined, and the problem is that it is not. You don't have mainstream society condemning them, for instance, and I think that's something we should take into consideration. And what I'm saying is that I grew up in Spain, and I could see how the Jewish communities had to increase the protection of the centers, of the institutions, of the schools, whenever the conflict flared up in the Middle East. So, of course, people would say, well, this is a consequence of the Middle East, but you have to say, well, it doesn't make any sense that Jews are attacked because
in another country.
Of course, in another country. Because they're seen as just because. No, not because they're seen, because they're targeted as Jews again. So this is
Spain's own history, going back to the 1300s, the 1400s. Where they banned all the Jews from Spain. They wanted them out of the country. you would think that the Spanish would be a little bit more conscious of that.
Yeah, but still, 20th century Spain has a history which is not very conducive to an open and multicultural society. In the sense, we had a civil war, and the civil war was won by the side, actually fascist side, by Franco, who aligned with Hitler and Mussolini. It was a national Catholic Spain that also reinstated and even invigorated all the traditional anti-Jewish prejudices through education, through even popular culture, through memorials where you still had the Catholic kings Isabel and Fernando being praised for having done the expulsion in 1492. So this was a regime that lasted until 1975. So the aftermath of that, you can still feel the effects of that regime even in today's democracy.
That leads me to something that I wanted to discuss with you. Several months ago, you were one of several authors of an article in the Star Tribune, which was very critical of reenactments of World War II, and in particular, people dressing up in German uniforms and having reunions and things like that.
Yes, I was totally struck by it, more, I would say even more as a European, where there are laws.
It was a Nazi-themed dinner.
It was a Nazi-themed dinner in a German restaurant in East Minneapolis. So of course it was quite surprising, even more for a European, where we have laws that prohibit that. In Germany this would be totally impossible, but even in Spain, this Nazi symbols and such a reenactment would be impossible. And the issue here, and this was also the spirit of the letter that we wrote, is first, of course, this sort of enactments are offensive to many people, but beyond that there's nothing innocent here, and the innocence that they claimed, or this issue of play, or since there are other reenactments, does not really apply for this case, since we're talking about the reenactment of the regime or reenactment of soldiers and even SS officers of a regime that perpetrated this a genocide. So there's no play there, and I would even say there's no innocence, since even some of these reenactors were connected to some organizations that are of a very dubious nature, dubious political nature.
And the Minnesota history is not untarnished. The Minnesota history goes back to the fact that the Bund was very big here. There were a lot of clauses and leases and deeds which prohibited people from selling to either blacks or Jews. Mm-hmm. It's a very tarnished image that really persisted until Hubert Humphrey became mayor of Minneapolis, mm-hmm. and took a very positive step
I heard
to ending that.
I heard so from my friend Steve Hunnix at the JCRC. He updated me on.
He's a frequent guest here.
I know on Minnesota's history of anti-Semitism. So which is I'm fortunate I'm unfortunate to be here at a time where my sense is that this is a very open society where things can be said, and where there is a productive and rich dialogue among communities.
I also find that there's a trivialization of the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. Politicians, in particular, use the phrase Holocaust to describe things that pale in comparison to the Holocaust. Nothing in my mind, and certainly in my experience, is equal to the Holocaust. A phrase which really found its way into our literature in 1946, speaking of death by fire, because the Germans intended to exterminate everybody in the ovens and did millions. And when I hear politicians talk about, well, this is like the Holocaust and things like that, it really disturbs me, mm-hmm. because it trivializes something that's without parallel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the term is used very freely and unspecifically. which is a problem also when we try to educate on the event itself, definitely. I think that the term Holocaust itself, I mean, even we have so many centers or museums that carry that name. The term is polysemic. There are different meanings, and if you ask several individuals, you'll get different responses of what is the event actually that this label describes. Is it the genocide of that brings us back to your previous question. Is it the genocide of the Jews during World War II, or is it the Nazi crimes more broadly, including political persecuted, like communist or socialist, Jehovah's Witnesses, handicapped, Sinti and Roma. So it is really not clear, and you will see in the literature that the term is used broadly for Nazi crimes or for the Jewish genocide, and of course, if you have already that polysemy, that different meanings of the term there, it is also used for many other things.
Now, one of the things that I did when I was teaching the course, and which I plan to do if in fact it's reinstated, I gave the students an optional midterm. They could either research and answer 2 essay questions, or I would furnish each of them with a yellow 6-pointed Star of David. They had to wear it over a weekend on their outer clothing, as the Jews did in Europe, and they have to report back in a writing as to what the reaction was. And I got some incredible reactions from the students, and they got such an awareness of self-consciousness in wearing the star and being questioned about it. And some people who said, you know, it's a very proud thing that you're doing. Other people said, or family said, take that off. We don't want you to be walking around with that for a weekend. And it was an incredible experience, and much appreciated by the students.
Well, interesting. Maybe we should incorporate that into our classes. I appreciate that input.
Actually, I gave that idea to 2 other universities that were teaching Holocaust studies, and I believe it's still in fashion in a couple of them. But so it was strictly voluntary, because I didn't want to force anybody to do it, but the students overwhelmingly adopted that as the weekend, and the reactions and were just sensational.
So they also probably that helped them to understand the meaning of the yellow star,
so
and the issue of stigma, and
even if they didn't have an incident, their self-consciousness of it, and people staring at them and things like that, and really was very important to their learning process.
Interesting.
And but we have in the world today, we have absolute chaos. We don't have a Holocaust. We have genocides going on right now, and we don't seem to learn. We've got Syria, where they're killing hundreds of thousands of their own people. I don't know why history does not teach us.
Of course, I mean, the phrase "never again" has almost become an empty slogan, but still, I think there is at least some progress in terms of their international efforts and institutions that try to prevent or to punish genocide.
It's interesting that the search for Nazis and Nazi sympathizers is still going on, as not only the victims are dying off, and in fact we just lost a woman who had been on this show several times, but the prosecutions of these people as they're tracing them down is still continuing, and it continued right here in Minneapolis last year when a man was extradited to Germany or Austria.
It wasn't. It's not. I mean, the process of extradition is open, but he's still living here. But the fact is that that new evidence was found on this person, and the discussion that it raised, it should people in that old age still be prosecuted and brought to justice? Well, I think the response is yes, and without any doubt. It's not only about these specific cases, but I
And
think
families were completely unaware of it. There was a wonderful movie called The Music Box, and it was about just that, of someone who had assimilated into our society. His family had no idea.
And the daughter finds out, and finally it's herself who...
And then they can't believe it, and the
I think
impact
this type of things, and that's why it's important to insist on the need to achieve justice, or at least try to achieve justice. It sends a very powerful message, and otherwise it's a message of impunity. People can get away. It sends a message also to present and future perpetrators, and this is the reason why we should be alert and pursue these individuals if they are charged with those crimes. Yeah.
I wish that there was a greater awareness in our schools, in our grade schools, in our high schools in particular, before the students get to college. If I taught 40 students a semester, that's only an infinitesimal amount of students who are getting that knowledge imparted. And I think as the IT revolution has taken over our sciences, we have moved the social sciences and the humanities to the background. And I think that we are a lesser society because of it.
That's a discussion that we have often at the college, which is the College of Liberal Arts. What's the role of the liberal arts in contemporary society? And one of the responses to that is the liberal arts teach critical thinking, and critical thinking is a fundamental tool in our society. It helps us to discern, it helps us to understand complex phenomena, and definitely in a society that is so immersed in technology and visuals, back to this tradition of the liberal arts is important, should be supported.
And liberal arts and being able to think and discuss, in my mind, can't be handled in 140 character Twitter.
Oh no,
and it can't be handled on your iPhone with a conversation back and forth. You really need, number one, a good text, and number two, a teacher, and number three, the willingness to learn about something that will be so important to you throughout your life in terms of learning some of the terrible things that we did, although you look at Ukraine and some of the terrible things we are still doing. It's so important. And we actually are winding down our time already. So if you have some closing thoughts.
Well, I appreciate very much the opportunity to tell about the Center for Holocaust Genocide Studies, or the things that we do, and I would also invite anybody who's watching this program to check out our website, to get in touch with us, to reach out, and well, we try to engage broadly with the community here and the Twin Cities and in Minnesota, and moreover, so I would invite everybody to learn what we do and to see how...
Professor Alejandro Baer, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna.